Thank you very much to all of you for being here today. It's such a pleasure to see such a turn-up. Before we begin, I'd like to just take a moment and thank Swire Properties for organizing this series of conversations at Art Basel Hong Kong. I'm especially grateful to the team behind the Swire Lounge Talks, Tanya and Levina, and of course, always grateful to Patricia Ip at Swire Properties for their incredible support and dedication and commitment to the arts. This panel, which is the launching panel for the Swire Lounge Talks, is called Art and Technology. It will be moderated by myself, Amir Gad, exhibitions curator at the Serpentine Galleries. In case you haven't seen the show yet, we opened last week an exhibition of Zaha Hadid's works at Artistry, so please go and see it. I am joined today by Peter Boris, who is the Executive Vice President at Pace Gallery. He has worked extensively with private clients, public institutions, organizing exhibitions in the United States, Europe, and Asia. Peter oversaw the launch of Pace Beijing in 2008 and continues to help coordinate the gallery strategy for Asia and the Middle East. In 2014, Peter organized the first US exhibition of Team Lab, a collaborative of digital artists based in Tokyo. Right next to him is Takashi Kudo. Takashi Kudo is communication director of Team Lab. Team Lab, also as part of Pace, who exhibited in 2014 with Pace Gallery. Team Lab is a collective, interdisciplinary, creative group that brings together professionals from various fields of practice in the digital society. Artists, programmers, engineers, CG animators, mathematicians, architects, and I think the list goes on, and it's an incredible list. Right next to him is Freya Murray, Program Manager and Creative Lead at Google Arts and Culture Lab. The lab is a place where tech and creative communities come together to share ideas and discover new ways to experience art and technologies. Freya and I had the tremendous honor of working together on an exhibition that is currently, again, on view here. So an amazing roster of speakers that is here, and really looking forward to finding out more about the type of works that they do. And what we're going to do is that each one of them will begin by introducing the projects that they've been leading on before we lead this into a conversation. Peter, would you mind starting and telling us a little bit more about Pace Gallery, and especially Pace Gallery in relation to Team Lab?
Thank you. Pace Gallery is, as you may know, has been around for about 55 years or so. And we have now become very engaged with the idea of where art is going and how technology is affecting it, or the direction that it's pushing it more clearly. Art is something that is not practical. It's emotional, it's intuitive, whereas technology is something we use based on science, but it is practical. So the mixture of those two things becomes very interesting. And if you put art on top of technology, it can create a very different animal, and that's what Team Lab has done. There's the thing that really makes them unprecedented is the scale with which the amount of technical skill and invention that they bring to the table in the service of art. And that's what's so exciting, and I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like it. It's sort of like when online news kind of supplants newspapers. And I think what we're seeing is a completely different frame to see art in, and Team Lab, I think, is the leader in that field.
Hi. Sorry, my name is Takashi. It's actually, as she said, we're like almost over 400 people. So it's a little bit small for these 400 people. So it's just only me. I came today, and actually there is one more person, Kazu. But it's anyway. Today it's I little bit want to explain it, like who we are and what we are doing, because it's most of you don't know what we are doing. So I made it some presentation sheet by actually it's Google Drives. So this is what we are doing. Oh, it's a little bit hard to read here. Oh, yes. Can you show the? Actually, she explained that our team lab it's a perfectly. So it's a. I'm gonna skip it that part. This is our one of these artworks. It's called it's a flower and people cannot not be controlled but live together. That is the titles. So this one is like we made it like anonymous number of this flower. It's a projection inside the rooms, and there it's born and it's bloomings everywhere, and it's actually it's not bloomings, but now yeah. Yes. So it's they were like like a life cycle. They were born and it's growing up and die, and we cannot control. They're based on algorithms. So what we can do is an audience gonna enter into these rooms, and if you touch the wall, or if you move the first, you can kill the flower. It means the flower gonna die. I think it's one of the most beautiful moment for it, at least for the Japanese peoples. So it's like you can kill the flowers, and if you didn't move the flower, it means a new life. It's gonna showing up around you. So you're gonna be one part of it in the artworks. That is this artworks. So we can do next. Yes. So this artworks was its debut in New York 2014 at the Japan Societies. Around that time, we thought nobody know us. So we had an opening party in there, and too many people came, more than we expected. And too many people inside the rooms, so people kill the flower immediately. So it's almost 5 minutes, it's no flower inside the rooms, like this. And then one person came to me, and he asked me, maybe too many people, and we should go outside of these rooms and make a space for the other people. And he left with other people, and then new flower gonna showing up, and and everybody became very happy. It's so I don't know. It's very like a special moment for the people inside of this space, and it's especially for us too. Another story. This one is the most famous, artworks, paintings. My favorite too. This is, like Mona Lisa in Louvre museums. Everybody knows this one is, the perfections and the beauties and a lot of the crowd in front of the, artworks. And when we talk about some Mona Lisa, we're talking about some of the perfections and its beauties, but nobody talk about some, other crowd, other audience. Most of the time we think it's annoyed with other peoples, because of that we think it's relationship between an art and its audience going to be one by one. We cannot change the object in the artworks because of that. This is an object. It's an audience and its artworks. It's completely separated. But in our artworks, actually we showed in Pace London until 11th of March. Yeah, this is also like one of the exhibition. You're gonna be one part of it in the artworks. It's maybe I don't have times to explain everything, but there is so many technology and so many things happened, and you're gonna be have very interesting experience. So it's okay. Thank you. So what we think is, like if you think about it, if there is kids learning inside the installations, most of the times, people are annoyed. But it's inside on our digital art. It's the kids learning inside of its artworks. They're gonna blooming the flowers more, and it's gonna be more beautiful moment. And this is another sample. Actually, this is me. We installed it flower and people. at London, and 2 days I didn't sleep. And I passed out on the floor, and I didn't wake up like in 2 hours. And it's around me, I didn't move, so it's so many flowers around me after that. And it's my bastard member took pictures and it's uploaded on Instagrams, and people put a lot of the like buttons. And the point is, I'm 39 years old, 2 days no sleep, and I slept on the floor, and it's even me, I became one of the beauties. And after that, what we think, if we're going to think about some little bit more relationship between not only in art and me separatedly. We're going to be one part of this artworks, and we can think about some little bit positive to the other peoples. Just imagine if 39 years old guy slept on the Mona Lisa, what's going to happen? After 2 seconds, I'm going to be kicked out. But inside of our artworks, even that thing is going to be like one part of the beauty, and we can be positive to the other people. And we believed this is kind of like potential, or it's some kind of what we want to do, or what we have interested in. It's a relationship between humans and other humans, or human and its world. Thank you very much. That is what we are making.
Hello. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit, just give you a quick overview of Google Arts and Culture, and then briefly talk about some of the projects we've been doing recently at the lab. So we'll start with this side here. So Google Arts and Culture, for those of you that don't know, is an app and a website, and it puts thousands of artworks, collections, stories from all across the world at your fingertips, and you can explore them really close up. You can kind of see here in close detail, so you can kind of really get and explore artworks in ways you might not be able to kind of explore them when you're looking at them in a gallery. So it's that complementary experience. And so Google Arts and Culture, as it's known now, it started 6 years ago, and it started very much with a handful of museums that we worked with, and now we have kind of over 1,000 cultural institutions that we partner with, who are making kind of the most of our technology, and also putting their stories for people to explore all across the world. And our aim is kind of, I guess, twofold in a way. One is to make arts and culture accessible for everyone, and to help kind of cultural institutions make the most of kind of technology and digital opportunities, and also to preserve cultural content for the future. And it very much, so in terms of kind of why we're doing this, well, kind of part of Google's core mission is about making the world's information accessible. And we see, of course, culture is very much a part of that. And then we also have a lab that's based in Paris. And I guess as kind of art and technology both kind of define and continue to reshape the world in which we live, at the lab, as Amira mentioned in the introduction, is we kind of bring creative communities and artists and tech communities together to explore and experiment and craft kind of new bridges between technology and culture. But it's always very much driven by, we see ourselves as kind of a facilitator, and it's very much working with the experts and driven by how technology can enable either to access artworks or to kind of experience art in new ways, and seeing it very much as a tool rather than, we don't see ourselves as the creatives in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you for introducing the type of work that you do. It's extremely fascinating. I think one of the first things I'd like to talk to you about is how can technology contribute to an appreciation of art. And it seems to me that with Google Arts and Culture and with Team Lab, there are almost different strategies, even just looking at the projects that you've introduced. In a way, with Team Lab, you spoke to us about this, the power of an immersive installation, the power of the emotion that can be used. Of course, you didn't go into the technology behind it, which is extremely complex, and I think it's also worth touching on it a little bit on the details of that. On the other hand, with Freya, it's almost a difference between the user and then the software. So with the Google Arts and Culture as a facilitator, contributing to arts and culture, facilitating for museums and institutions in order to make the most out of technology, like you said, and also pushing the boundaries of technologies. But it's also becoming a platform, a resource, a collaboration. With TeamLab, it's creating settings and situations in which people can go and experience it. I wonder if you would share that, if you believe that both of your strategies are different in terms of how we implicate technology. Is anyone willing to tackle this question? No.
So I think, yes. So I think in terms of, I think it's totally right. In terms of what we're doing is basically, like, just to give an example from some of the projects that we've been doing from experiments where we've been looking at how we're applying kind of machine learning to kind of navigate art collections online and enabling users, as you say, in that relationship with uncovering and exploring artworks, to about having the kind of conversations, like just before Christmas we brought together it was over 70 kind of artists, architects, scientists, engineers together to have a conversation about kind of the role of, what is the role of machine learning within a cultural context, and bringing kind of bringing people with different experiences together to have and facilitate those conversations, I think is very important. And it kind of, a big question that came out of that is, as we increasingly kind of rely on, as humans, we rely on technology, how does that affect our place in the world? And I think that's where we look at it then in terms of, as new technologies emerge, is inviting artists in to explore how they use that as a tool to expression and how they use that in their practice. Whereas with TeamLab, you're doing the creating.
Oh, okay. So actually, it's from our side, this is my personal answer. We are 400 people, so maybe there is another opinion too. But it's what I think is like the most biggest difference from like in Google or it's Silicon Valley's and it's TeamLabs is like when we make some output, there is something we want to explain, and we're going to use digital or technology for that. And it's most of the times today it's a digital or it's a technology it's going to use for how to extend over its humanities, like like how to use, like extend over our brains, or it's how to extend over our eyes, or it's how to extend over the human itself, we think. And do you think it's quite, there is already like very smart people going to do that in the Silicon Valley. And what we have interested in we want to extend over like a physical world itself. I mean like there is a little bit difference. There is an internet, and we can connect to the internet through anything. We can use our personal smartphones, or it's on a PC, or it's a Macintosh, or whatever. But what we have interest is we want to extend of the space itself. And like when you conscious or unconscious, you're gonna be one part of artworks, or you're gonna be one part of beauties. That is our final purpose. So we use a digital or technology just only for that. So but anyway, we use a lot of technology or digital from Silicon Valley. It's as well can we make in Google.
Yeah, I think it's the emotional connection. It's the emotional connection that artists bring, and how they use. They don't have to, but if they're using technology, how that kind of is used to express the world and the world in which we live. And yeah, as you say, it's very much that we just provide the tools and the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're two different animals.
Yeah, totally.
Really.
But we can live together.
But technology, technology helps us navigate the world, and I think art suggests what it might be coming out of the imagination from an irrational source, in the artist. So one is about distribution, the other is about experience. And what we learned about in the exhibitions that we've done with TeamLab is that people want they don't necessarily need to possess an object as a painting or whatever. It's the experience that they take away, and that's now becoming as important. And their work, if you compare their work or stand in front of one of their works for 5 minutes and see what you feel and what you think while you're standing there, and then go to a painting that you love in the fair here, and do the same thing, and then you get an idea of the dimension that they're bringing to art making.
I would agree with that. I mean, in a way, I think the quote that you started off with, Takeshi, with your slides, is almost the common ground of it all. I mean, your quote said, digital art can improve the relationships among people. And I think in a way, that's also what brings together both strategies, even if they are different animals. It's the role that technology can play, and how the impact of technology can also affect not only people but also institutions. So we're looking really at the micro and the macro level here, and the type of effect it can lead to. Now the question is of course a lot of assumptions are made as well when it comes to digital technologies, how alienating they could be, but at the same time we recognize the importance of digital technologies as really leading and taking such a greater part in our lives. And I wonder if you could share some thoughts with us on this particular point. Why do we need digital technologies within arts and culture? We've already seen some of its fruits, but at the same time, how do you respond to this comment that is so often made about the alienation of technologies, and how through your work have you also gone against these particular ideas?
From our side, actually, we had it, like the last exhibition in London, in the rooms. We made it 6 independent artworks, and there is like the monitors work and the projection works, and they were independent, but they were affected each others, and there is no boundary and between artworks to the another artworks. And the things is, like digital, we can, like, the most biggest part for us is, we can explain it changing itself. I mean, it's, like, or it's a concept or ideas. It's inside of our brains. There is so many concepts and ideas. But when we try to explain it in our concept idea in physical world, we had to use some kind of physical materials. We needed some paint, or we needed to have it in a canvas, or we needed to have it in iron, and it's using the sculptures. And a material has boundary. And when we try to explain something, using by material, it's gonna be some boundaries. But like a digital, or it's a technology, there is no boundaries, as like inside of our brains. And it means that we can explain it, expression itself. It's always in our idea or its concept is changing, and it's affected each other. If I got it's a new idea gonna affect it's my old ideas, and it's always changing. And the point it's changing. We can explain by digital, and this is quite much meaning for us. It can be answered.
I think also, like, well, we talk, it comes up a lot about kind of art and technology and what it means in terms of the two together. But I think, we all know throughout history, art has influenced technology, and likewise technology has influenced art, and they've both innovated each other. And I think they have a very intrinsic relationship in that both are kind of push humanity forward, technology-wise, not always arguably in the best ways, but in terms of they are, at their core about innovation and kind of looking at the world in which we live and expressing that. So I think it's not something that's new, but as more and more technology does become part of our everyday lives, and it becomes almost sometimes an extension of ourselves, it's at looking at how these tools are used. But I think it's very much that it always needs to start with, for me, I always think it starts with the kind of the content or the story or what it is that's wanted to be expressed, and then the technology is secondary to that. And I think that differs in terms of different practices. But with the Zaha Hadid exhibition that we collaborated with Amira and the Serpentine Galleries on, you know, her, well, the title of the exhibition here, There Should Be No End to Experimentation. When we kind of collaborated on this, it didn't start that we were like, we're going to do a VR, a virtual reality piece. And I think that would have been a really wrong way, and I think where sometimes things go wrong to start with the technology. It was very much that, okay, she said there should be no end to experimentation, and is there something interesting that we can explore here? And working with the Serpentine Gallery and the Zaha Hadid Foundation, it was looking at, well, her paintings, kind of they preempt virtual reality in a way in terms of the use of perspective. So would it be interesting to kind of experimenting with taking kind of the DNA of her paintings and translating this in a virtual environment? So I think it's kind of the starting point that's important to think about.
Well, what's great about both is that, and what's happening, I think, in the real world, is that technology like Google can take what the artists are doing, and the artists will use technology in a completely different way than a scientist would, or someone. And I don't think, in general, digital technology, if you paint a flower in oil paint and you paint one in with digital technology, neither one is real, you know, or more real than the other. And so why should our response be any different to that painting painted in oil than one that uses digital language? But the exciting thing about technology and art is that the poetry, or I think of it as the irrationality of art, kind of can be distributed on to a mass audience more easily, and that's what we've never had. That, you know, you would have to go to a museum, or you would have to see it in a very special place. They're like cathedrals, whether it's a gallery or a museum or whatever. And the potential at least exists, although I don't think the vehicles exist yet. But for a mass, you know, a distribution of art, of sensation, of whatever art can give you, lifting you, whatever, might be distributed across a much broader spectrum of people, and that's got to be good. What could possibly go wrong?
I really love what you're all saying, this idea that the digital technologies can be an extension of our thinking, that it's not to be considered, it's just a tool amongst others, and it is coming secondary to the content. It's coming as another methodology that can be adopted in order to achieve a certain effect or certain works. And I think that's really important to also approach it in that way, and how we can further understand the harmony that can exist between art and technology, and the impact that it can also have with dissemination. Yeah, Peter?
I mean, it's the separation is the mistake. It's one living thing within another living thing, and one is intuitive, one is rational. It's just like us. Our consciousness living in an unconsciousness, or as you know, Takashi would explain to me his relationship to nature as a living thing within a living thing. And Western ideas separate things, whereas I think coming in Asian philosophy and Asian sensibility, it does not. And the sooner we get to understand ourselves as living things within living things, and start to even see separations like art and technology as one complementing the other, one literally feeding the other, then I think the world will become more understandable. But it's right now in a convulsive state, because it's recreating itself literally, and technology is one big reason why it is.
I think also as well, like technology can move so fast, and there's kind of new developments happening all of the time. And I think I often think about, and when questions are asked, kind of around, are we losing like the craftsmanship, which I think we can see kind of through TeamLab, absolutely not. But I think it's about really it's how we go beyond thinking sometimes where it's like, oh, there's a new shiny new toy, let's play with this and create something with it, and how we go beyond and think, why is that tool being used, and is that the kind of the best tool to express what we want to express. And that's where I think it gets really interesting. And I think often, like with virtual reality, it's it's still, particularly within an arts context, at a very kind of beginning and experimental stage. And I'm excited at when it gets kind of, when that's pushed, and the people that are going to push that forward in the most exciting way are artists, and how they then, from hacking the technology and really pushing and really playing beyond kind of the tools that are just immediately available, and look at how that can be used, I think is interesting.
I mean, it's interesting. At another talk yesterday, the comparison was also made that in the early 1960s, when it came to film took time to be accepted as an art form. And can we consider also virtual reality or even artificial intelligence in that phase? Are we in that state right now where there is a little bit of a reluctance? At the same time, we are experimenting with these technologies. At the same time, artworks are increasingly, I mean, just go and count the number of artworks that deal with the virtual reality that are presented here at Art Basel Hong Kong. And are we exactly in that state? And before we started this conversation, Peter, you said also something interesting, where it was about how you first came across the work of TeamLab, and then the decision of presenting and doing an exhibition of their work, and also making that difference of the fact that they were from Japan was very important, because it also did not have that separation that we're just talking about, that is somehow dominating our Western thinking, but that I also think is evolving. Do you want to say some more about that?
No. Oh, well.
White, I can
In that
say.
case.
Well, no, I've learned an incredible amount. I was, through TeamLab, and I had gone to Japan for 30 years and had had tremendous immersion in it. But as far as understanding the fundamental nature of the world I was living in, I've learned more in 4 years listening to Ikan Sanada and Takashi and others about what it really is, the difference. And that is, it comes down to an empathy with nature, which suggests a certain way of being in the world. And it's reflected in the space that they present in their work. It's a shallow space. It's a multi-point perspective space, as opposed to a depth space, a single-point perspective where, like, your eye goes to the most important meaning. And here, in one of their works, you can enter in any point, and you walk, you go through it, and you gather meaning, or you collect meaning, or you generate meaning as you see fit. So you're creating it. And this idea of creating our own reality, which I think that is parallel to, is what the new rules of the universe are about, I think. The responsibility on us to create, and freedom to create, with the idea of seeing the world in a new way, not through the lenses that we've seen it since the beginning of civilization. It's not going to be different from, we are humans, we are animals. We've been evolving for 2 million years, and that still lives in us. But on that irrational, instinctive base is a highly rational and extraordinary mind that has revolutionized the world, particularly the last, since Darwin, really. And it's extraordinary how we are redefining our world, the nature of the universe over the last 250 years. This is now, we're going into hyperspeed as technologies improve and increase and become more powerful. And it has to be that art, which is telling us how the world feels to the artist, and we all learn through that, how can art not be very, very involved with this new medium in one way or another? And the fact that they have the scale of the group, it gives them a kind of muscle that most artists who would be working independently or in a small group wouldn't have. So the scale of the technological muscle that they have allows them to respond in kind to the scale of the issue. And I think they do it really in an interesting way.
So, it's my opinion is, like, I cannot explain by words very well, but it's, I try is, like an independence, and it's a boundary. It's not opposite way of thinking. Can be, it's, exist at in same times. Like, sometimes, people think it's independent, and it's making a boundary is, like completely opposite. It's when you are become independent, you should make it, like the boundaries. But I think it's not, and it's like it's, internet, and especially there is, like everybody it's an independent, and there is no boundary. That was it, first we had it, some kind of dream for the internet, and it's, what we are making on the installations is we try to make it no boundary, like installations, and we believe it's, like these words also can be very positive, and it can be very, at least for us, we think it's very nice. So it's and it's the point is, we cannot change our mind, or it's, the values of the the thinkings. It's, expected except experience. It's, if we talked, maybe we think it's, we understanding, but it's, we understanding is by full bodies. So it's, we need an experience. So that's the reason why we try to make it installations, and it's you're gonna be one part of it, it's artworks, and it's you're gonna be connected to the another audience, and it's through that experience, if people could feel it's you're gonna be independent, but in the same time it's there is no boundary, and it's you're gonna be the beauty. It's, if I don't know, it's, I try to explain by words, but it's, like, I hope it's, you're gonna have it in our installation. It's much easier to understand.
Well, the experience of your work, and I think that is critical. If you think of the Western societies becoming sort of hyper-rational over the past 100 years, and now in a state of hyper-rationality, law of supply and demand says that because we're human and we need more than just that, more than just rational relationships to the world, we need an emotional and intuitive relationship, then that art which delivers that will be attractive to an audience. And that's what we found. So I think art from Asia, art from India, art from Africa, art from places that are not automatically thought of as art-making centers, they're delivering a content and a feeling that is like water in the desert in the West. And I think that's because he's in the middle of it, he can't see, he's not missing it. Like, I felt I connected to something that I didn't get from Western art. But he wouldn't necessarily understand that because he's not living in the middle of the West. He was living in Tokyo. So it's not missing there. But from all the exhibitions that we've had, the reaction of people and the agreeableness, whether it was a 2-year-old child who just wanted to crawl around, or a scholar from Harvard, or people in between who knew different degrees about art, everybody looked, and everybody had the same kind of calm come upon them. And I mean, I've not seen that. There's no politics, there's no ego, there's no identity. It is really about beauty, their work, and almost exclusively. But that face is grounded in an extraordinary complex amount of technology, and that that's what makes it, I think, another thing that makes it unique. But you don't notice the technology, you notice the beauty.
I think that's really important because it feels like when I was at the exhibition recently, it's the simplicity. It feels like it's the simplicity of the experience. You just it's the beauty in the environment over. You don't really think about actually what's gone in and what's making these things happen, because it almost feels like they happen seamlessly. I think it's nice.
I think, I mean, it's a beautiful point on which to also end this panel and then open it up to the public, also realizing that, of course, art can also see the potential in everything, and that's, I think, also one of the beauties of the arts and culture. And I wonder if anyone has a question or a comment.
Thank you very much for the discussion. Historically, artists are individuals. They perfect their art, and then they can do whatever they want on a very simple canvas. But with the technology, the artists are creative people, and you need other people to enable your thoughts to make into reality. So it needs a lot of assistance from the engineers and who can put that seamlessly into your beautiful artwork. So I'm interested in knowing how that creative process works from ideals to realization. Thank you.
Okay. Actually, it's, our process is, like, when we making the prototypes, and it's we making the reviews, and it's we prototypings, and it's make some things. Actually, it's, we make it at the teams. Like sometimes we have it's mathematicians with groups for its algorithms, and it's architect, and it's of course different computer language programmers, and the sensors, robotics, and it's things is like when I compare with it other like fine art, what we have to do is we have to invent it in a brush, and we have to make it like paint. And we have to make it a tube for the paint, and we have to make the canvas itself too. It's everything that we have to create from zero. So it's we have to make it by teams. Otherwise, we cannot make it output. Of course, we use it with like the hardware, like the projector or its monitors. But when we make it like space installations, we need a engineer from its sensings, and we need people from its hardware, robotics, like mathematicians. And we have some kind of its concept, or we have some kind of an image we cannot explain by words, but it's like some kind of a joke. It's we can laugh, but we cannot explain by words. And we make the teams with it inside of the team labs. And we make something that have our image on in the prototypes, and we feel something is weird, and we need to try to fix it. It's sometimes from its algorithm part, and sometimes from its sensing part, sometimes from its architect part. We don't know, but it's the process is like sometimes 8 months or it's 1 year. We're prototyping, and we talked. We make it test rooms, and we have experience by ourselves. We have just inside of our mind, and it's with other people also. So it's we have experience, and we try to talk. This part's something weird. I don't know. It's something that I cannot laugh about that. So we're gonna change sometimes script or concept or whatever, and we try to make it output. So anyway, we need a teams to create an output. But I think it's like much cheaper than before, because it's like anyway it's like we are around just 20 people to create one like installations. But just imagine it's how many people try to create paint, and it's how many like factory try to make it like a brush. and it's somebody needed to invention of this tube for this paint. It's if you think about that, it's much cheaper to create something of this in our image to be in real, I think.
I was just going to say, I think in terms of, so some tools that are available is that artists can use those and still work very individually on kind of creating artworks. We've been working with Chow Fei and a project with Tilt Brush where we said, kind of gave the support in terms of this is the tool available and this is what you can do with it. And it's really interesting. So that was a few months ago. And speaking to her yesterday, she said she started now kind of really using that more in her practice and has kind of familiarized herself and really kind of developed her craft of using that as a tool. And I think it is interesting, this point around actually where you may want to, an artist may want to express something but need kind of engineering input or a different input. And I think that's where that's interesting, is around kind of the conversation and the language, because I think language it's interesting. When we did this, kind of had this conversation around machine learning, and we had this artists and engineers in conversation where they asked each other, just asked each other questions from kind of different perspectives. And I think it's about finding that common language, which does present challenges for, I imagine, for some artists and and engineers. And it'll be interesting in terms of how that evolves. But I think it's very much around the language. But it's a really good point that you make.
Hi, thank you. Quick question regarding the Google project. Could you share with us something that you've learned about your audience, either in terms of who they are or how they visit your sites and what their viewing patterns are, that might have surprised you?
It's a good question. So I think in terms of, because I work very much kind of in developing the creative projects for the lab, so I'm not an expert in terms of the kind of the viewing patterns, because I'm thinking you mean in terms of kind of the app and the website. I think what is interesting is in terms of the reach. We have a large audience actually who use it, are based, and I'm going to say very broad because I don't know the exact parts, but in the region of Africa, and in terms of, and I think, and in some more rural areas, and I think that's around having kind of the virtual access to the inside of museums. With Street View, that was, it used to always be outside, and it was through kind of Google Arts and Culture that we first did indoor Street View and adapted the camera for that, because it was about being able to give people access where they may not be able to travel to the Guggenheim or Campes Gallery, etc., that they could go and experience that. So I think in terms of, it's really diverse in terms of the kind of the geography of people who are kind of visiting the site. So there's from that angle. And then also from being able to get really close into paintings offers people who, so curators obviously for, are experts and at this, but enabling kind of anyone to just explore further into a painting than they may have already done so. So you get a lot of people who are kind of interested, so obviously people who are interested in arts and culture, but haven't necessarily trained in it, who are interested in kind of finding out more. So it's quite a broad answer, but hopefully that kind of answers your question.
So this is a question for Peter, because you brought in an interesting point about art from India. And I actually come from a technology background, but I'm trying to work a lot with folk artists from India. And these are artists who, for hundreds of years, literally, their families have been in these traditional art forms. All their stories, although being beautiful, and I love it, but they're very old stories because they talk about village life, all how life used to be at that point of time. So for example, this is actually painted by one of the artists. But I struggle with how to make it relevant in today's times, yet maintain the integrity of their storytelling. To make it a little relevant, because art is ultimately supposed to be a commentary on life as well at some point, right? So how do I still make it relevant that people can still identify with it and yet still maintain those old stories and beautiful art that they have?
I don't understand what you're asking.
So
how do you make the
the stories are all very old stories. Like this, all this art is traditional folk art,
Yeah.
right? And in today's times, it's not exactly a reflection of today's times.
Oh. Well, I don't think you can make it. I think the value or the content of that story, which if it's been told for a long, long time, then there's probably something there. And then it just becomes, I mean, practically an issue of presentation. But it's the content, and from India, I would say it's the spiritual content. I mean, what the issue, it's hard to export India to the West because the whole structure, the whole system of gods and legend and is very different from Judeo-Christian. So, I mean, it's a language thing. But once you get into it, it's extraordinary, man. And the vitality, and I mean, basically inventing religion. You know, back, you know, one of the first. It is very, very powerful. What needs to come out from within, from the ancient, will come out, and you just create the means. It'll happen, but you've got to put artists in the role of expressing that content in, you know, you can't do it rationally. An artist has to do it, so it's just to, you know, expose them to it and just keep doing it until you do it, until they do it. But it's there.
I guess part of your question also has to do a lot with this idea of how can we, I mean, it doesn't matter, does it? You can all hear me? Yeah. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe part of your question also has to do with how can we increase an understanding on these traditions and folkloric traditions that you have in India, and can technology also contribute towards making it not only accessible and gaining an understanding on it, but also providing a platform where this can continue to exist. And I mean, one of the ways in which I would suggest to answer this also has to do with one of the 3 missions that, for instance, Freya mentioned about Google Arts and Culture, and it's this idea of preservation. And I guess this would form also one of these tools in which that can continue. Correct me if I'm wrong. Any other questions? Last one? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Can we take these 2 and then we end?
Thank you. I'm not sure, this is maybe looking a bit too far in the future, but let's say you have a hybrid of both of your animals and you take the art form that you're trying to express, and, you know, with VR and maybe holograms becoming more sophisticated, that once you strip the hardware and you have these sort of works being able to be projected anywhere and being able to be viewed on an iPhone on the go, where do you see the role of the collector going with the progression of digital art?
I think that we'll be selling tickets more than objects in the end, and or subscription or whatever. The vehicle for that delivery hasn't happened yet, because it's got to deliver the same buzz you get from looking at the Mona Lisa. You have to get an equivalent 21st century buzz from whatever it is we're going to, you know, artists are going to make. And I think that's possible. I don't think we have the delivery system yet. The closest thing, or the most interesting thing, or an extraordinarily interesting thing, is their environments. That you are immersed in an experience that, you know, is more than just your eyes. It is a multi-sense thing, which that's ultimately where we're going. I mean, we have all of this sensation or sensory data coming in. We're aware of only a tiny bit. Just think of, well, that's another discussion.
I mean, is it going to be about intellectual property in the end? Is it, can we rent and buy it? Is that what's going to be collectible?
maybe it won't have, maybe it won't be an elite, very, very expensive thing. Why should it be? Why shouldn't, if you had an art, something we called art, that delivered the way that great art always has in terms of emotional connection or intellectual satisfaction. You know, if it's priceless, if it's $1 billion, fine. If it's nothing, fine, as long as we have it. But I think we would be better off if, perhaps collectively across the world, if everybody had access. That would be, I mean, that's one, and I think, well, that's not going to happen. There will always be art dealers.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we're heading, and that's one of the great things that Google is doing.
I think in terms of, though, in terms of kind of, so I think there'll be different types in terms of art that's, say, let's call it digital art, but then in terms of kind of traditional paintings and things, I mean, I don't know about you, but there's nothing that beats tangibly seeing a painting up close. And I thought I was at the Maritz House in Rotterdam a few weeks ago, and I was really excited because I hadn't been there before and I could see the girl with the pearl earring. And I was talking to the director of the gallery there, and she was saying, actually, because the poster that can be, it's such a great poster, she said, the girl with the pearl earring, and because that's been distributed almost as a poster so widely, it has made it so unbelievably popular for visitors because they just want to see the real thing. And I don't know, I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to lose our ability to appreciate paintings, but I think the creation of future art may not necessarily be
I think
object-based.
there's two things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Final question or did you change your mind?
I changed my mind, but I guess we've been talking about digital art since the 1970s. Like, digital art is nothing new, and collecting digital art, you know, has also been going on around that time. Like 10% of all digital works that are sold, 10% of the entire art market is based on digital art, and you know, it's a market that is growing and you know, strengthening. My ideas are more about kind of the importance of the support of the gallery and also organizations like Google to look at funding independent projects, things that aren't part of the traditional system that we see based in the forum at Art Basel, and looking at what Google are doing to support independent projects that are not just happening in physical spaces, but that are happening in sort of on websites. You know, you hear about artists who are developing galleries online, you know, such as Tumblr or independent websites that are happening all around the world. So, what is your organization doing to support these independents who are actually, to be quite honest with you, a lot of the time it's at the forefront of what's going on beyond the marketplace. No offense, but that's a reality.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very much through in terms of how, as I said at the lab, it's very much about kind of experimenting and bringing in artists and looking at how we support those projects. So it's always very much driven by what the artists want to do. We've just, so in terms of like we work with like the likes of Rhizome, and we've been looking at kind of more broadly at digital preservation, and then individual artists who are creating artwork specifically for kind of an online platform. And it very much, we don't have kind of a formalized strategy of how we work with artists, because we see it very much as kind of bespoke. So I don't have kind of a set answer because it's very much driven by the individual.
Yeah, and it's from my side. It's we want to create it like a huge artworks, as like it's, you know, we want to make it like cities, and it's made by it's a digital art. And if we could live inside with it, you know, that like that digital cities, digital art city, we can be. It can be very positive to the other peoples. It's, for example, in Tokyo, now it's like too big and it's complex and it's fixed. We think it's, we cannot change. It's almost, it's a perfect, it's cities. So it's, we're gonna be, it's a little bit negative to the other peoples, but if we could make it like city itself by digital art, and it's the people living inside of there. It can be one part, but it's artworks. Maybe we can be a little bit positive to the other people, and it's, that is what we want to do, but we don't have so much budget. So it's if Google and it's, some people
We've
inside
got our
of
next
this,
project
research,
sorted.
where it's, we're very open for this supporting, and it's, at least we want to make that.
This is all the time that we have today. You have been such an wonderful public. Please give a round of applause to our wonderful speakers.